Hello, Tanner, and welcome to episode 39, World War I. When the year 1914 began, most of Europe had been at peace for many years, more or less. But that didn't mean that all the countries were friendly with one another. Far from it. There was animosity and old hatreds dating back hundreds and even thousands of years. And it would only take an excuse for another war to break out again. But this time, the war would engulf almost the entire world. That excuse came in June of 1914, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated. The Archduke was heir to the throne of the Austria-Hungary Empire, an empire that no longer exists today. Ferdinand and his wife were gunned down in public by this kid, 19-year-old Gavrilo Princip. Austria-Hungary blamed this assassination on Serbia, that's this little country right here, who they believe funded the operation. This was the excuse that Austria-Hungary needed to declare war on Serbia. Now, Austria-Hungary figured that they could quickly conquer Serbia and add it to their empire, something that they were wanting to do for quite a while. What they didn't figure on was Serbia calling on their ally, the Russian Empire, for help. Russia entered the war on the side of Serbia, and Austria-Hungary realized that now they were going to need some help too. So Austria-Hungary called on their ally, the German Empire, to enter the war. Now Germany knew if they were going to have to fight the Russian Empire, then they better take out Russia's ally first, France. So Germany invaded France, but on their way to France, the German army rolled through the neutral countries of Belgium and Luxembourg, and they added them to their empire. Now, this really ticked off Great Britain because Belgium was Britain's friend. So, Britain declared war on the German Empire. Now, Austria-Hungary and Germany were in a real pickle of a mess. So, they got the Ottoman Empire to come in on their side. The Ottoman Empire, also known as the Turkish Empire, was more than happy since they had just lost a bunch of territory in a previous war and were hoping to regain some of their past glory. And so it went, with more countries entering the war and calling on their allies to come help. By the end of the war in 1918, a total of 38 countries had entered the fray. As countries entered into the fighting of World War I, they joined one of two sides depending on who they had an alliance with. These two sides were called the Central Powers and the Allies. Let's take a close look at which countries fought on which side. The main countries on the side of the Central Powers were the Austria-Hungary Empire, the German Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. Also fighting with them were Bulgaria, Azerbaijan, and Jebel Shamar, which no longer exists today either. The main countries fighting on the side of the Allies were France, Great Britain, the Russian Empire, and, later on, the United States. Also on our side was Andorra, Australia, Belgium, Brazil, Canada, China, Costa Rica, Cuba, Greece, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, India, Italy, Japan, Liberia, Montenegro, Nepal, Newfoundland, New Zealand, Nicaragua, Panama, Portugal, Romania, San Marino, Siam, and South Africa. Oh, and Serbia, of course, but everyone forgot about them after the first month of fighting. Now, the Russian Empire would drop out of the war after just a few years because of a rebellion back at home. After that rebellion, the Russian Empire would be transformed into the Soviet Union. The main theater of World War I was, of course, Europe. It saw more fighting and more destruction than anywhere else. In this theater, Germany was forced to fight on two fronts: the Eastern Front against Russia, and the Western Front against France, Britain, and the United States. Now, the term front is a new one. In the past, armies ranged all over, trying to block and defeat enemy armies or capture key areas. But with the advent of trains, trucks, and better roads, armies were more mobile than they had ever been. So battle lines became longer to to prevent being flanked by the enemy. In the past, battle lines would rarely stretch more than a few miles. But in World War I, the battle lines along the Western Front stretched over 500 miles from the English Channel in the north, down through France and Belgium, all the way to the neutral country of Switzerland. This turned Europe into one giant battlefield. The second most important theater was the Atlantic Theater. It was important because so much supplies were being shipped to the Allies in Europe by sea. Now, if the Germans could gain control of the Atlantic Ocean and cut off this supply, they would gain a significant advantage. Battles and campaigns were also fought by many other nations all over. Throughout Africa, the Balkans, the Middle East, India, and in Asia and the Pacific Ocean. When World War I broke out, the United States refused to get involved. This war was none of our business, and we were not going to have anything to do with it. At least that was our opinion in the beginning. True, the Allied countries were our friends, and they had asked us to join them, but we refused. We were going to remain neutral. As the war dragged on, however, public opinion began to change. Many of us had friends and family back in the old world, and while many Americans wanted the United States to get involved, there were still others that did not. But when a German submarine attacked and sank the British cruise ship Lusitania in 1915, killing 128 American civilians, public opinion really turned against Germany. It got worse in 1917 when Germany began unrestricted submarine warfare against all ships trading with the Allied nations. After Germany attacked and sank 7 of our merchant ships, we could no longer stay out of this war. On April 6, 1917, the United States Congress declared war on the German Empire. By the time the United States entered the war in 1917, the fighting in Europe had bogged down into a stalemate. Neither side was able to make significant gains, and it looked as if this war might go on forever. But the United States had grown to be a very powerful nation by this time. We were able to send over a large number of soldiers, and our economy was able to provide much-needed weapons and supplies to the war effort. It was just enough to tip the scales in favor of the Allies and end the stalemate. Now, the war would drag on for another 19 months, but as the Central Powers began to realize that they could not win, they began signing peace treaties. First, the Ottoman Empire surrendered, then the Austria-Hungary Empire, and finally the German Empire. At the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the ceasefire that ended the First World War went into effect. Germany officially surrendered by signing the peace treaty in a railway dining car. Remember that railway dining car, because it will make another appearance in our story next week. World War I lasted 5 years, and it claimed the lives of over 17.5 million soldiers and almost 7 million civilians. That was more than 2% of the world's population. Towns and cities were destroyed, immense stretches of countryside was devastated, empires were toppled, and instead of settling old disputes, it caused even more hatred and animosity. Absolutely no good came from this war. It was the most destructive war that the world had ever seen. But in the hopes of preventing such a war from happening again, many of the countries got together and formed the League of Nations. It was an organization where representatives from countries around the world could come together and talk. It was designed to settle disputes through diplomacy, not war. But the League of Nations had no real power, and they were unable to prevent an even more destructive war from breaking out just 20 years later. The Austria-Hungary Empire, the country that had started this whole war, was broken up into many smaller countries. The Ottoman Empire, which had existed for over 500 years and had been the ones to put an end to the remnants of the 2,000-year-old Roman Empire in 1453, lost a great deal of territory. 5 years after the war, internal revolts caused the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and it was replaced by the Republic of Turkey. The German Empire also lost some territory. At the end of the war, the German emperor fled, and a new republic government took over control of the country. Now, Germany was blamed for starting the war with England and France, and forced to pay over $31 billion in reparations. Germany was also forced to endure some very harsh economic penalties. The size of their army was severely limited, and they were prohibited from building any tanks, large warships, or any kind of air force. Unfortunately, the loss of territory, the harsh economic and military restrictions, and being blamed for starting the war caused a lot of angry resentment in Germany. And it was this resentment that would directly lead to Germany starting World War II.